Editing your photos is key to making them look their best, but it's intimidating when you're new to it. In this video, I'm walking you through the basics of editing food and product photos in Adobe Lightroom. I'm showing you the exact approach I use with all of my photos and showing you where I place those sliders and why. Whether you use a DSLR or phone camera, I'll show you how to go from this to this. Hey guys, Mandy here. Rarely, if ever, will a photo look its best straight out of your camera, no matter how good the lighting or the camera are. This lemon tart photo was taken in beautiful natural light with a great DSLR camera. Even so, it has a blue tone and the yellow looks subdued, so we popped it into Lightroom and got this bright and beautiful aftershot. The reason I use Lightroom is that it's super powerful and user-friendly, and it comes in both a desktop and a mobile version. So I'm going to show you both. All right, let's do this. Start by importing your photo if you're on desktop, or by clicking the blue button in the corner on mobile. We're going to edit this product photo to make it even brighter and bring out the details in the jar. On desktop, click the button with sliders on it to open a tab that displays light, color, and others. On mobile, light and color are found along the bottom. Because we're just talking about Lightroom basics, we're going to adjust light and color and mostly leave the other functions alone. Then at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to fix two common and extremely annoying photo problems: uneven lighting across dark backdrops, and how to finally make your white backdrops look white. No more blue hues. Selecting light reveals sliders for exposure, contrast, and more. Here's what they look like in mobile. When I edit, I start with exposure and go down the list, adjusting each one and then making small tweaks at the end if I need to. When you edit your own photos, the position of your sliders will be slightly different from mine and from one photo to the next because of differences that are always going to happen to your lighting, shooting angle, camera settings, and more. But the principles of which direction to move each slider and approximately how far you move it should be true for nearly every photo you edit. Exposure adjusts the brightness of your entire photo. It's like a dimmer switch in a room. As I move the slider to the left, the whole photo darkens. As I move it to the right, the whole thing gets bright, and quickly. Small exposure adjustments lead to dramatic changes in brightness. As a side note, I intentionally underexpose photos in my DSLR camera because I know I can brighten them in Lightroom later. If you overexpose your photos in your camera, there's no data in those overexposed areas and you can't bring it back. If you use a phone camera, they tend to underexpose photos on their own, so you're good. Depending on how bright the native photo is, I typically place the exposure slider somewhere between +0.2 and +0.4. For this photo, I like the look around +0.3. It looks a little blown out, but it's okay. The other sliders will fix that. As I adjust the other sliders, focus in on the jar, particularly what happens to the black lid and the writing on the label. Next, we'll adjust contrast. Contrast adjusts the contrast between the light and dark areas of your image. Moving the sliders to the left decreases the contrast, which flattens it. Light colors will look darker, and dark colors will look lighter. See what's happening to the lid and the label? Moving it to the right makes the contrast more dramatic. Dark colors get darker, and light colors get lighter. I always move contrast to the right to make it more dramatic, but not so far to the right that colors start to look artificial. With most photos, I set contrast between +10 and +30. Highlights controls the brightness of the lighter parts of your image, but I think of it more as controlling the amount of detail in your photo. Moving highlights to the left darkens the lighter areas and increases the detail. See the lid and the writing on the label? The lid looks overall richer and the writing is more legible because we darken the light areas. Move highlights to the right to brighten the light areas and decrease detail. I always decrease highlights dramatically to pull out that detail, and to do that I usually place my slider between -50 and -100, which is all the way down. Shadows is highlights alter ego and controls the brightness of the darker parts of the image. Move to the left to darken shadows and decrease details. Move to the right to brighten shadows and increase the detail. Since I'm all about increasing detail to make product packaging look extra attractive and food look extra enticing, I always move shadows to the right. How much I move it varies a lot from photo to photo though. If the darkest colors in the photo aren't all that dark, like a glass of iced tea or something like that, you can get away with moving it to +50 or higher. If the image contains really dark colors that I want to keep dark, like this black lid, I only increase shadows a little, maybe +10. Whites controls the white point while mostly leaving dark areas alone. Move left to make whites look more gray. Move white to make white areas even more white. I always increase whites to make sure that the white areas are crisp. Where I place the slider depends on the image, and it ranges from +10 to +60. As a very general rule, I go easy on the whites, around +10 to +30 or so, for images that contain dark objects, and I go a little heavier on the whites, like going above +30 for images with mostly light-colored objects. Finally, blacks controls the black point while mostly leaving light areas alone. Move left to deepen the black areas. Move right to brighten black areas and make them look more gray. I always move left to make black stand out, but not so far that the darker colors, like the wooden bowl and the greenery here, look unnatural. For most of my photos, that's between -30 and -70. All right, now let's compare the original to the edited version. You can do this on desktop by pressing \. On mobile, just touch the photo and hold it. You can see that we didn't make any dramatic changes, but the photo looks brighter overall and the product looks more attractive, and that was our goal. So let's summarize the light edits. A little increase in exposure goes a long way. Slider position will be different for every photo, but the direction you move each slider almost never changes. Highlights and blacks go to the left, and the other 4 go to the right. Watch the sliders as I flick through photos I recently edited for the website. You can see that the slider position changes, but the direction never does. I'll say it again, highlights and blacks to the left, everything else to the right. Finally, press \. On desktop or press and hold your photo on mobile to toggle back and forth between the original photo and your edits. 2 other great functions. If you're on desktop and forget what each slider adjusts, hover over the word and it'll tell you. Unfortunately, I don't think the mobile version has this function. To reset a slider to 0, press reset on desktop or double tap the name of the slider on mobile. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it'll save you a ton of time when you're editing a bunch of photos. Next up is color. Before we jump into color though, let's just take 1 second to like and subscribe. I have so many more video ideas, and the more love they get, the more I can create. To adjust color, open the Color tab on desktop. On mobile, click the Color button next to Light. You'll see sliders for temp, tint, vibrance, and saturation. Temp controls how warm or cool the color appears. Moving left makes them cooler, and moving right warms them up. Tint adjusts how green or purple the colors appear. Left leans green, right leans purple. Both of these are useful for landscape photos, particularly when they include sky or water, but I almost never touch them for food and product photos. Vibrance and saturation, however, super useful. Saturation controls the intensity of all colors equally, so it is a big gun, just like exposure was under the Light tab. Move saturation left to turn your photo completely grayscale. Move it right to bump the intensity of every color. Like with exposure, a little saturation goes a long way. I always increase saturation by moving right, but I rarely go above +10. For this photo, I like a +3. Vibrance also controls the intensity of every color, but it doesn't cause unpleasant and really unnatural color casts. Move left to make the image closer to grayscale, but note that it never gets full grayscale, even when you move it all the way left. Move vibrance right to increase the intensity of all colors. See how the colors do get unnatural at the extreme end, but not as atomic as they did with saturation. I always increase vibrance too. With most photos, I set it somewhere between +1 and +30. Here, I'll go with a +17 to enhance the reds and the greens even more. So now we've adjusted the color of the entire photo. Now we're going to adjust individual colors to emphasize the ones we love and de-emphasize ones we don't. Click the color wheel. It'll bring up a new box called Color Mixer. This is what it looks like on mobile. On desktop, select Saturation from the drop-down menu. All colors are listed. On mobile, you need to click each color individually and adjust its saturation. Saturation still adjusts the color intensity, but now we're adjusting the intensity of each color separately, rather than all of them at once. I start by looking at the image and deciding what colors I want to enhance and which ones, if any, I want to downplay. If the photo doesn't contain any blue props, I usually start by decreasing the blues all the way down and see what happens. The reason I do this is that depending on your light, photos can often take on an unnatural blue color, which we'll talk about more in a sec. In this case, I know that the weathered wood replica surface we used doesn't contain any blue, and since I'm editing this photo for the website, I'll take the blues all the way down so that the surface looks true to life. Since your goal is a gorgeous photo and not one that contains a true to life backdrop, you may want to increase the blues and create a blue wash surface. Changing color like this is actually a really fun way to increase the versatility of your backdrops. Looking at the rest of the photo, I know I want to enhance the color of the crust and the tomato sauce. And I actually do want to downplay the basil a bit, since the previous whole photo saturation adjustments we did gave it a slightly unnatural intensity. We'll start with the red. Note that the adjustment we do to the red applies to everything that contains red. So keep your eye on both the sauce and the cherry tomatoes to make sure that neither start to look weird. Move left to decrease red's intensity. Move right to increase it. Here, I like about a +30 to really enhance the sauce. Now I'll adjust the crust, which isn't entirely yellow or entirely orange. It's really a mix of both. You can find out which colors Lightroom thinks are in an object by clicking the target button and clicking the object. On desktop, a new slider will appear that you can drag left and right and watch which saturation sliders move. Notice how the yellow slider moves more than the orange slider. Lightroom is helping you adjust them both together in a way that it thinks will look most appealing. On mobile, it looks a little different. Press the target and then select saturation. Touch the photo over the object you want to adjust. Rather than a new slider appearing, the component colors, here the orange and the yellow, will become selected and you can see their numbers change as you move your finger left and right. Also notice what happens to the olive oil. Because it also contains orange and yellow, it will change too, even though you place the target or your finger over the crust. Since there's no aqua, purple, or magenta in the photo, you can move the sliders all you want and nothing's gonna change. All right, so we're done with saturation. The other options are hue and luminance. Like with temp and tint, I find that hue and luminance are more useful for landscape photos. I do use them for food and product photos in certain circumstances, but just not all that often. Hue actually changes the color of a color, if you will. So sliding it to the left will make reds look pink, and sliding to the right will make them look orange. I'm happy with the color of the sauce as it is, so I'll leave it at 0. If you select green, you can see that the greens get yellow as you slide to the left, and more of a blue-green as you slide to the right. Some reasons why you may actually want to adjust the hue are getting your brand colors just right, tweaking the color of greenery that you're using as props, or changing the color of your backdrop to mix things up and better suit your style. For fun, let's change the color of this wood surface. Select the blue radial button. Pull saturation all the way up so that we have lots of color to play with. Move hue to the left to make the wood look teal, or move it to the right to make it purple. Just remember that if you do have blue props in your photo, their hue is going to change too. Hue's a bit of a wild card, but it can be a lot of fun. So it's not going to be your go-to, but I recommend adding it to your experimental toolbox and playing around with it. Finally, luminance. We'll go back to red to demonstrate it. Luminance adjusts the brightness of a color. Move to the left to darken the reds. Move to the right to brighten them. I think the reds look most natural right at 0, so that's where I'm gonna keep it. As my last step, I look at every aspect of my photo to make sure that everything looks natural. Your eye gets used to editing really quickly, so I like to take Coco Chanel's advice of taking off one accessory before you leave the house. But when you apply that to editing, it usually means reducing the saturation by a few points before saving your final photo. When you're learning, it also helps to ask a friend to be a fresh set of eyes and tell you if something looks over-edited, since it's so easy to do. If you join the Replica Facebook VIP group, you can even post your before and after photos and ask for feedback from the group. Everyone there is crazy supportive and willing to help. I'll pop a link to the VIP group below. All right guys, moment of truth, I'm pressing backslash. Okay, tell me that isn't an awesome improvement. Finally, I want to show you how to fix 2 common problems: uneven lighting across a dark backdrop and white backdrops that look blue rather than white. Dark backdrops can be trickier to photograph than light-colored ones because they make uneven lighting more obvious. What that looks like are hot spots that the eye perceives as glare. You can see here that the bottom corners look shinier than the rest of the photo. The best way to combat the unevenness is by changing your lighting and flagging off uneven areas, but that's a topic for a different video. In the meantime, the dehaze function will help a ton. The dehaze function is under the Effects tab. On mobile, effects is right next to color, and dehaze is the third slider. Moving left adds haze, which I never do with food or product photos, and moving right removes it. Here, we'll move right until the background looks more even and the bottom corners blend in with the rest. Depending on your light source, white backdrops can take on a blue hue. When I see this in my photos, I adjust the blue color before I adjust light. Do this by decreasing blues and purples as much as possible without making the photo look grayscale. Then I edit light using the same process we discussed. Highlights and blacks to the left, the other 4 sliders to the right. And here we go, pressing backslash. How good does that look? Just remember that any blue props will also be affected, so just be careful with that part. And that's that, Lightroom basics. And by the way, this is Jensen, who was incredibly quiet while we filmed this whole video. If you want to learn more about creating depth with a DSLR camera or iPhone, Jensen suggests you click here. And to learn how to master natural lighting, he thinks that one would be for you.